When it comes to cameras and videography, one of the most important things to understand is the difference between prime lenses and zoom lenses. Most practically, it massively influences how you are going to use your camera, and then too, because of that, it shapes the content that you'll be able to create. Now, put very, very simply, the main difference is that a prime lens, like this one, remains stable in its focal length and therefore its field of view. It always sees the same picture. While instead, a zoom lens, like this Sigma, by rotating the dial, can zoom. To you and me, that means that a prime lens like this one will always see the same field of view. The only question is whether the image is in focus or not, which is why these lenses have a focusing ring, usually at the end, but no way of zooming, because there isn't one. Zoom lenses, like the one attached to this camera here, are a bit more complicated in that their internal machinery allows a variable focal length, which allows a more zoomed in or out image, notably while maintaining the same degree of clarity. And if we look at this simple zoom lens, this is a standard 14-45 kit lens that comes with a lot of older Panasonic cameras. It only has two control dials. One at the end is the focusing ring, and here, more proximally closer to the body, we have the zoom dial, which controls the variable focal length that we were talking about afterwards. So like this, when the lens is fully retracted, this is about equivalent to a 14mm focal length, and as we extend it, we get closer to that full 45mm focal length with various stops in between. Unlike prime lenses, for example, where you might have a 15mm, 28mm, a 50mm, and so on, you would need separate lenses in each of the focal lengths that you want. And I'm sure you'll instantly recognize that that means what a zoom lens is doing is effectively behaving as a series of prime lenses, just all crammed into one lens. In the case of this lens that we've got right here, instead of needing to carry a 14mm prime, an 18mm prime, a 25, a 35, a 45, we only need this one lens. So the question then comes, camera guy, if a zoom lens is as good as lots of different prime lenses, but you only need to buy one, why doesn't everyone just use zoom lenses all the time? Well, there are some very good reasons. So to start with, let's go through the facts on prime lenses. The hallmark feature of a prime lens is that they have a single fixed focal length, which means that the photographer has to move closer or further away relative to their subject, depending on the image that they want to capture. That means if you are somewhere like a football match or a zoo, for example, where there are areas that you cannot physically go into, then you will not be able to get any closer than your prime lens allows. However, one of the main reasons why people like prime lenses is the superior quality that they often offer, with sharper images, better low light performance, that is to say a wider maximum aperture, and less distortion when compared to a zoom lens. Thirdly, size and weight. They are just practically often smaller and lighter in terms of their construction. They have far fewer internal parts, and even this one is attached to an adapter, which I can quickly remove. You will really struggle to find a zoom lens of this sort of size. But because they don't need all the extra machinery to make the zooming happen, they are smaller, lighter, and often cheaper as a result than a zoom lens. Number 4, we're going to move to the Hanema to give it some love. For me, this is a really important one. Prime lenses foster creativity. Because you can't zoom in and out with a prime lens, you as the photographer, as the videographer, you are forced to think about the composition of your image and to change it if you don't like it. It's not to say that zoom lenses can make us lazy, but I definitely find myself thinking a lot more deliberately about the shots that I create or that I'm not able to create often with a prime. And then number 5 is aperture. I mentioned this before, so maybe I'm cheating, but because prime lenses typically have a larger aperture down to f1.8, 1.4, this allows you to get a more dramatic depth of field effect and better bokeh. That's enough about primes. Now let's have a think about zooms and why you might prefer them. Now, the first one is fairly obviously going to be flexibility. Zoom lenses have this variable focal length which allows the shooter to change the composition of their image, zoom in and out, from a fixed position. You don't have to move to swap between things that are very far away and things that are much closer. And this can be quite extreme in a way that varies by manufacturer and by lens. This particular example is a 14-45, it's a little kit lens. perfect kind of focal range for anything that I can see with my own eyes. This one here is a pretty classic lens, the Sigma 18-35 Art. 18-35, a bit closer still, perfect for things like interviews, talking heads, things at quite a close range, sort of portraiture type range. But this one, even though it's about the same size, it's actually even smaller than the 18-35. This is a 28-200mm, and this would be much better for something like a sports match, where I can maybe get to the side of the pitch or the field, but not close enough to where the players are to get away with one of these shorter lenses. And then number two, with flexibility comes convenience. Speaking about things like event photography, sports matches, wildlife, these high-paced scenarios where changing your lenses between a series of primes would be completely impractical, you need to be able to zoom in and out between targets quickly. A quality zoom is basically the only way to do that reliably. Then number three comes with that versatility, and I feel like I'm cheating a little bit, but one decent zoom lens can replace a series of prime lenses if you get a quality lens. While it may be true that most zoom lenses are not going to compete with many prime lenses at the same focal length, that is to say, a zoom lens at 15mm will probably not outperform the equivalent prime at 15mm. It's going to be much more difficult, time-consuming and expensive to acquire the series of prime lenses that you would need to cover all of your demands. Whereas a high-quality zoom lens, especially one with a wide focal length range, that will probably meet most of your needs, especially as a beginning or amateur photographer. Thing number four to consider is the complexity and size. You'll notice in this design actually that although I'm turning the zoom dial, the size of the lens overall is not changing shape. All of that machinery is turning on the inside to change the focal length. Clever designs like this make lenses heavier, more prone to failure because there's simply more that can go wrong, and all of this makes them more expensive. And the final thing to say about zoom lenses again is image quality. Because while modern zoom lenses are incredibly good and they're getting better all the time, they will more often than not have worse image quality relative to a dedicated prime at the same focal length, again controlling for other things like manufacturer, age of the lens, quality of the glass, etc. But you'll notice this particularly at the extremes of their focal range. And when testing zoom lenses, at least in my experience, you'll often notice a sweet spot somewhere in the middle of the focal range of a zoom lens that perhaps won't quite be regulated at the shortest or longest throws. So thank you for watching. That is a beginner's guide to the difference between prime lenses and zoom lenses. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative. If you'd like to see more videos like this on photography, videography and filmmaking, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and come and follow me on the social, especially if you want to follow along with my actual job working as a surgical doctor. I really love talking about cameras and photography and making videos, so let me know what you thought and let me know what you want to see down in the comments below. Take care and I'll see you next time.